As Lee mentioned, U.S. pork exports have been up year over year. For the month of May, Mexico was the largest buyer, taking nearly 30% of American shipments. Japan accounted for 22%. China, South Korea, and Canada rounded out the top 5. We mentioned in our previous episode of Market Journal how ag producers and consultants could learn more about soil health at the first 2017 Crop Management Diagnostic Clinic near Meade on July 18th. At the event, Nebraska Extension soil scientist Charles Shapiro will discuss soil characteristics such as bulk density, porosity, and infiltration. We talked with Charles about that recently, but we started by asking about his long-term tillage study located at the Haskell Ag Lab in northeast Nebraska.
Well, we started a research project in the late 80s where we were comparing no-till, plow, and disc. And we've been doing that with several nitrogen rates and corn on corn and corn soybeans since that time.
And what does the research show in summation?
In summation, what's interesting is looking at the weather patterns and the tillage effect. And I have a student working on that right now, and we've broken up the rainfall into dry years, normal years, and wet years. And the no-till, as you would expect, does a lot better when we have drier weather. When we have normal weather, it's kind of a wash. And in the wet weather, we actually get a very slight increase where we disc.
Is there something a farmer can do on his or her operation to try to find out what their soil looks like just below the surface, to try and find out if they have those characteristics?
Well, what we like to say is that when you go to no-till, you change a whole slew of soil properties. And for the most part, they're beneficial. So what we have coming up at the NREC, formerly ARDC, in July 18th, is a soil health clinic where we'll look at several properties, biological, chemical, physical properties that let us assess a field. Now, most of us are used to the chemical properties. That's the NPK, organic matter, pH. What is new on the horizon, and it's been kind of talked about for the last 10 years, is some of the physical and biological properties. So the no-till, when you don't disturb the soil, you create a much better soil structure, which will, in many cases, allow more infiltration of rain, which in this year, where it's been so dry, another inch of rain could give you 10 bushels of corn. And so it's very important that we improve our infiltration as well as our water holding capacity.
You brought tools along today to show some of these properties. Tell me about the process that someone could do.
Okay, so about 10 years ago they came up with a soil quality kit which takes the scientific research techniques that graduate students use all the time and simplifies them so a farmer could do these tests in 5-10 minutes. And so what we are going to talk about at the field day is doing an infiltration test so you can determine how much rain your crop can take, and usually we measure it in inches per hour. Some of the soils only take a 1/4 inch an hour, others 2 inches an hour. And of course, more is good, but too much is too much. So some of those sands up in the sandhills take water too quickly. So you can measure that. And so what we would like to recommend is that people, if they're going to try new practices or they have situations in their field, they can measure some of these things like infiltration and a couple different spots and get an idea of what's happening.
Are you going to tell me how, or do I have to come to the event?
Okay, so we have a ring. It really doesn't matter what size the ring is, but you could take a coffee can, cut out the bottom, and then you put it in the soil, maybe 1 inch, 2 inches, and you have to figure out what 1 inch of water would be in there. You've got to go back to your high school math. And then let's say you put 1 inch of water in there. We put plastic on the soil. We slowly put the water in there. Then we pull the plastic out and time how long it takes for that water to infiltrate into the soil. And so that gives us our rate.
And what about compaction?
Compaction is a physical problem from putting heavy equipment on the soil, and that squeezes out air. And so we can measure that. We call that bulk density. And then you could take a similar can. Usually we use a smaller diameter, and we put it in the soil, carefully remove it, and if we know the volume, and then we dry the soil and weigh it, and that gives us an indicator of the density of the soil. So usually when you move to no-till, sometimes you get a little more compacted layer in some places, but then you improve your bulk density in others. Especially with cover crops or adding carbon residue to the soil, you'll make the soil fluffier, let me say, and that will hold water better as well.